Technology was being developed in the ancient world that wasn't seen again for 3,500 years. So what happened? From King Tut's personal camping equipment to the inventions of the Maya, here are some of the most amazing pieces of ancient tech. Inventions of the Maya. The ancient Maya civilization was responsible for tons of impressive inventions. They built royal palaces, observatories peeking out through jungle canopies, and highways across Mexico. They even invented elastic and rubber, along with underground reservoirs to store water during droughts. But perhaps the most famous invention by far is the Mayan calendar. The Maya came up with the Hob calendar, which was even more accurate than our modern Gregorian calendar. They used their advanced knowledge of astronomy to determine that every year has approximately 365.2420 days. They weren't 100% accurate, but they were extremely close. The true approximation of a year on Earth is 365.2422 days. And yet, oddly enough, the Gregorian calendar that we use today is based on an estimation of 365.2425 days. The Maya were 0.0001 degrees closer. They were also obsessed with Venus, and somehow they figured out that it passes around the sun every 584 days. The Maya, despite being viewed as barbaric by the Europeans, had a more stable understanding of the cosmos than anyone in Europe. They invented a lot of other cool stuff too, like the filtration system to give the population clean water. They understood how to use volcanic minerals known as zeolites to filter fresh water. Their purification system was so effective that many of its aspects are still used in filters across the world today. The Maya were expertly filtering water in 164 BC, something the British didn't figure out until 1627 AD. The Maya also developed impressive tools for use in agriculture, elastic production, and chocolate manufacturing. But since they are long gone, who knows what other kinds of crazy things they built that we don't even know about? There could be epic Mayan machines still buried in the jungle that nobody's ever dreamed of. And now for number 7, but first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Ronnie Gillen and Joseph Spires for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing discoveries. For dinosaurs or advanced technology, we've got it all. Lost art of the Minoans. The Minoan civilization of ancient Greece prospered 3,500 years ago. They developed a specialized technology that disappeared with them and then wasn't seen again on this planet until about 70 years ago. Amazingly, the Minoans figured out how to create composite ship hulls using only natural materials. I'll give you the specifics of the construction in a second, but first I want to express just how unique of a skill this was. The ships being made by the Minoans were unlike anything created by any other civilization of their era. Then, when the Minoans vanished around 1500 BC, they took their knowledge with them. It wasn't passed on to cultures that came later, like the Phoenicians. The main construction of a boat hull during 1500 BC involved drilling and rebaiting wood planks so that rope could hold the planks together with wedges from inside the hull. This provided tension on the rope to pull the planks together. Gaps between planks were filled with a flax material or hemp fibers. People would also use pitch as a seal to prevent water from seeping through the hull. Pitch was a fabulously simple invention made by mixing pine resin with pulverized graphite from a dead fire. The method used by the Minoans to make their ships was very similar, but with a few key differences that changed the game. The Minoans used cypress planks connected with hexagonal shims to build their hulls. They would drill holes in the plank so that they could easily be joined by the shims, which were almost like an early version of steel fasteners. It didn't take any advanced technology to do, but it was a genius idea. The method worked by providing a much stronger joint. The Minoans also used linen cloth with pine resin for sealing the hull, a combination that worked as a natural polymer. The distinction between Minoan ships and those of other civilizations would have been truly remarkable. The Minoan approach yielded vessels that weren't only lighter, but also boasted superior hydrodynamics, resulting in increased speed. Yet these advantages weren't limited to weight and speed alone. Minoan ships also exhibited enhanced maneuverability, added structural strength, and the capability to undertake extended sea voyages. The monks of Sutra Isle. The Middle Ages weren't always as barbaric as fantasy movies would have you believe. In some ancient Scottish ruins, recent excavations revealed the exceptional medical abilities of some monks who lived nearly 1,000 years ago. The monks had developed painkillers, appetite suppressants, and even a reliable cure for hangovers. The ruins of Sutra Isle are in rough shape. Nothing at all stands except for the busted shell of a building that looks like an abandoned farmhouse. If you were to come across this thing, you'd likely think it was an old relic at the back of a farmer's wheat field, but in reality, it was an old hospital and friary. Today, it's one of the most important medical sites from medieval Britain. Let me also tell you something about monks. They didn't just sit around in caves all day praying and humming. They usually had a lot of stuff to do, like produce wine and honey, copy manuscripts, care for the sick. At Sutra Isle, they acted as nurses and doctors. The medieval hospital was built at the edge of the main road leading from Scotland to England. If you've seen Game of Thrones, you might remember the King's Road mentioned in the series that leads across the realms. There was something similar in Britain called the King's Highway. It was the main thoroughfare from Scotland to England, built atop the ruins of a much earlier Roman road. The hospital was founded at the edge of this important street in 1164 by King Malcolm IV of Scotland. A few important things have been found here during excavations. Archaeologists have discovered 15 trenches full of medical waste, things like blood and plant scraps that were used to make medicinal potions. Archaeologists were also able to analyze old jars that were used to store these medicines. Analysis of the jars showed the presence of hemlock, opium poppy, lard, and henbane, proving that these monks had an astounding knowledge of herbal medicine. They knew how to dull pain, create a general anesthetic, and cover wounds after amputations. And in the Middle Ages, there were lots of amputations. Archaeologists have found heaps of amputated body parts, which means the monks were also dedicated surgeons. As for that hangover cure I mentioned, the monks created their version using toxic plant seeds and salty liquids. This induced vomiting, which presumably made a person's hangover less brutal. Egyptian artificial light? Electricity, as you and I know it today, was invented in the 1700s by our good friend Benjamin Franklin. You may picture him as the old-timey white guy with the kite, the string, and the key. But what if Benjamin Franklin wasn't exactly the one to discover and harness the power of electricity? What if it was the Egyptians who figured out the truth of electricity 2,000 years earlier? At the ancient Temple of Hathor in Egypt, there is a relief carving that's been baffling experts for decades. It's located within the Temple of Dendera, which was created around the year 50 BC. The image shows what looks like an elongated light bulb connected to a wire, with that wire connected to a power box. Amazingly, inside the light bulb is a filament, though to be fair, the filament is in the shape of a snake. It does look like a light bulb though, there's no getting around it. And mainstream archaeologists say it's not a light bulb at all, it's just a flower. The image that we see as a light bulb is actually a religious drawing representing spiritual energy and gods, but the visual similarity is uncanny. The evidence doesn't stop at a light bulb. There are environmental clues that suggest the Egyptians had a source of electrical lighting. Throughout tombs and temples, archaeologists have identified almost no soot damage on the ceilings. These are structures that are often underground with no access to natural light, so they would have been pitch black without some sort of light source. If the Egyptians had been illuminating these subterranean tombs and dark temples using candles or fire, the ceilings would have been damaged by soot. Keep in mind that the Egyptians also painted and decorated the interiors of their buildings through countless hours of painstaking work. This would have required an intense light source for them to work by. There's no way they were making these beautiful artistic creations underground, using nothing but candles and not leaving a single trace of soot on the ceiling. Maybe it was an electric light, but there is another explanation as well. A simple, boring, but logical explanation is castor oil lamps. These lamps burn cleanly and don't leave soot. It's possible that the Egyptians may have figured out how to make the lamps. It honestly makes the most sense, considering that not anywhere in ancient Egyptian text is there a single mention of electricity. Light bulbs in ancient Egypt are a fun idea, but not entirely based on evidence found in logical reality. Underfloor heating. Even today, underfloor heating isn't exactly the norm. People who live in cold places don't typically have heat coming up from the floorboards. Yet as early as 5000 BC in North Korea, such systems existed. Stone Age humans living on the Korean peninsula heated their floors using a hearth to move hot air underneath their floorboards. By about 900 BC, homes throughout many parts of Asia had a single hearth for cooking and another that was specifically used as a heating system. It was all to keep their toes warm. The Romans took the idea of hot air from a hearth and dramatically improved it. Both Greeks and Romans used a system of underfloor heating called hypokausts. When building a house, they would leave a large gap between the ground and the bottom floor. They essentially built their houses on pillars so that there was a big crawl space underneath. Then, using a hearth, hot air was forced into the gap beneath the floor. The heat baked the floor, giving their bare feet a nice warm touch, while also heating the entire home. It seems like a simple solution, and it was. But it was also efficient enough that hypokausts continued to be used in England until at least 1904. The Moray Terraces. The Moray Terraces in Peru look like a Roman amphitheater. This ancient ruin is in the shape of a deep bowl, a circular pit with terrace-like stairs stacked up toward the valley above. It's an extremely mysterious ruin because scientists have never figured out what its purpose was. The best guess right now is that the Moray Terraces were used as an open-air laboratory by Inca scientists, likely for agricultural research. Looking at images of this place, it really does look like an amphitheater, and it looks like the terraces could have been used as seats, with the show being held in the bottom bowl. Maybe gladiatorial battles or some epic Inca operas were held here, but researchers don't think that's what was happening. From the bottom bowl to the highest terrace, there is a difference in temperature of 27 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a huge change in temperature for such a small place. It only takes a few minutes to climb up the terraces, yet the temperature can change from freezing to sweater weather. So why in the world would the Inca create such a place? What could it have possibly been used for? Scientists think it was to study wild vegetation and also to understand how crops grow. Each terrace is a microclimate. This would have allowed the Inca to plant seeds along each terrace to see how plants grew at certain temperatures and with very specific access to sunlight. It may have been the world's first botanist laboratory, and it was built over 500 years ago. Ptolemy's manuscript. Researchers just revealed an exciting manuscript from a very long time ago. The manuscript was found scrawled on a recycled piece of parchment in a medieval abbey. The original manuscript isn't medieval, though. Scientists think it was written by legendary Greek mathematician Claudius Ptolemy. He lived about 2,000 years ago at the height of the Roman Empire. The manuscript is amazing simply for existing, but the words scrawled across the ancient parchment are also shocking. It seems to be a message detailing how to build and use a tool that can trace the distances between stars. The manuscript was first found in 1819. Somebody tried to make sense of it, but mostly ruined the pages by pouring a chemical treatment on them. The chemicals stained the pages brown and made the words even less legible. It wouldn't be until 2020 that a team of scientists from several New York universities got to work analyzing the manuscript. And now they've deciphered the instructions on how to build an artifact known as Ptolemy's meteoroscope. This was a very impressive tool. It could calculate heights and distances in relation to cosmic bodies. But what's truly amazing is that if this thing was built today, it would still work exactly the same. More practically, the unusual-looking tool was used to determine one's latitude from the equator. It could also determine the exact date of an incoming solstice or equinox. This strange metal object was even able to locate a planet within a specific zodiac sign. King Tut's camping bed. One of the most incredible pieces of technology from ancient Egypt wasn't a unique tool that helped build the pyramids. It wasn't a highly advanced drill that was used to carve vast underground tombs either. One of the greatest achievements of the ancient Egyptians was creating some camping equipment. King Tut was the Egyptian pharaoh 3,300 years ago. The boy king's tomb was discovered in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter. A lot of amazing things were found buried deep within the desert grave beneath the Valley of the Kings. There were mummies, sarcophagi, treasures beyond your imagination, and also a small, lightweight bed made of hard wood. It was a small folding bed and it was built extremely low to the ground. There were 5 other beds inside the burial chamber as well. While at first researchers were more impressed by the mummy and the gold artifacts, over the years they've been able to take a closer look at everything else in the tomb. The folded wooden bed was ignored for a long time, but was actually an incredible discovery. It was packed into a Z shape by a rather clever mechanism. The mysterious object was recently brought to Naoko Nishimoto at the Musashino University in Tokyo for study. Naoko is a specialist in ancient furnishings and woodworking. According to Naoko, King Tut's Z-folded bed is the only real camping bed that's ever been discovered. It was a portable bed that folded using tiny mechanical hinges. Not a single other pharaoh in all of Egypt has been found buried with such a device. Naoko says that the technology likely existed before King Tut, though the one found in his tomb was revolutionary. The marks on the bed suggest that whoever built it had nothing to look at for reference. It was a completely new creation that was achieved through trial and error specifically for King Tut. The ruler obviously had a great deal of interest in camping and the outdoors. Thanks for watching! Which of these amazing examples of ancient technology did you find the most impressive? Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Santa Cristina Well. The well of Santa Cristina is not actually a traditional well and is much older than Santa Cristina herself. This structure has been around for a very long time, and the well is just a part of a very ancient site. Located in the Mediterranean island of Sardinia, it was built by the ancient Nuragic civilization during the 11th or 12th century BC. These people were extremely talented builders and stoneworkers, and many of their stone structures still stand today. With seemingly perfect proportions and geometry, it seems like a much newer structure than it actually is. At the entrance, there's a semicircular rock enclosure surrounding a trapezoidal staircase that leads underground. The ceiling of the entrance features what look like upside-down stairs that seem to mirror the staircase below them. These are actually known as a series of architraves. Inside is a well that sits beneath a 23-foot-high dome. It's clear, based on the Nuragic culture's surviving architecture, that they were expert masons. They are famous for their smooth and perfectly squared stonework that looks practically modern. But they left no written records behind, and the purpose of the Santa Cristina well is a mystery. The structure was sacred to its builders and functioned as a ceremonial site. But nobody knows what exact beliefs inspired the Nuragic people to design and build it. The site was possibly used by a water cult, since access to the water well is its main feature. It may have also functioned as an astronomical observatory, a place people went to observe the stars and other heavenly bodies. Every year during the equinoxes, the sun lines up directly with the opening and sunlight shines down on the water. During an event called a lunar standstill, which happens every 18 years and 6 months, the moon shines down through the well's ceiling. This would have been an extremely sacred day for the people, and now you can actually visit the site and try to imagine what kind of ancient rituals must have happened here. Like the ancient Maya and their cenotes, the Nuragic people created domes to honor the water deep underground, as it was here that the people honored the mother goddess, and some of the earliest rituals were born. The Tablet of Shamash. Some say the Tablet of Shamash is proof of ancient alien technology. In Mesopotamia, Shamash was the god of the sun, the truth, and justice. It was believed that Shamash rode across the sky on his solar chariot and then traveled through the underworld at night as he prepared for the new sunrise. This story goes all the way back to about 3500 BC. Fast forward to the 1800s, archaeologists uncovered the mysterious Tablet of Shamash at the site of Tel Abu Haba in Iraq. This was once a Babylonian city where the god Shamash was worshipped by all. The tablet seems to depict Shamash as a huge, imposing god, much larger than his human subjects. It also has celestial symbols and a large piece of strange technology in the center of the scene. The suggestion is that the Babylonians had some kind of cosmic technology that allowed them to convene with extremely large deities. These deities, like Shamash, may have actually been ancient aliens that were in contact with the earliest human civilizations. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Nabta Playa. Nabta Playa is one of the oldest stone circles in the world. It's located south of modern-day Cairo in the Nubian Desert, one of the world's hottest, driest, most inhospitable environments. This site is so old it predates Egypt's pre-dynastic era, and it may be where ancient Egyptian astronomy originated. In other words, Nabta Playa could be the oldest example left behind by the civilization that eventually became ancient Egypt. The rocks there are perfectly aligned with the four cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. They were arranged by a civilization that existed 7,500 years ago and that scholars don't know much about. Researchers believe that the formation may have been used to track the summer and fall equinoxes, although probably much more than that. Anthropologist Fred Windorf discovered the site in 1974, when he nearly walked past it without noticing its significance. Thankfully, he took a second look, and he found the remnants of an ancient society that engaged in complex cultural rituals. These stone structures distinguish them from the hunter-gatherers that lived at the time, whose traditions were much simpler. Nabta Playa is part of a growing body of evidence that ancient people knew much more about the stars, celestial bodies, and movement of the earth than we give them credit for. Ancient Stargate. At the incredible site of Anuradhapura in Sri Lanka, there is what some believe to be an ancient stargate. This stargate could have been used to teleport ancient people through the cosmos to mysterious places far away in the universe. But let's start at the beginning. Anuradhapura, also known as the Land of Kings, was a sacred city constructed back in 377 BC. Today, it's at the heart of the Buddhist culture in Sri Lanka. There are ancient Buddhist temples here, giant stupas, and the site attracts thousands of devoted pilgrims every year. But there is one curious symbol carved onto the side of a rocky ruin that nobody can figure out. It's been bothering archaeologists and historians for over a century. Most mainstream scientists agree it was made as some kind of cosmic star chart, though little is known about what the chart shows or what its purpose may have been. To make matters even stranger, the icons carved in the chart are unlike anything else in the area. It almost looks as if an entirely different culture of people made the chart. This has caused speculation that the star chart is in fact an ancient stargate, perhaps left behind by a race of beings that had significantly more knowledge about space and time than we do today. Or just the ancients once again were much more knowledgeable about the world than we give them credit for. Light of the Pharaoh. Beneath the mighty temple of Hathor at Dendera, there is an interesting picture carved on the wall of a subterranean passage that appears to show an ancient pharaoh experimenting with a light bulb. In the carving, the pharaoh can clearly be seen with a very large light bulb, with the light bulb even having a filament and being connected to a wire. It looks as though the Egyptians may have come up with the light bulb thousands of years before Thomas Edison was even born. But in true Egyptian fashion, the depiction of the light bulb is full of mystery. Experts say the bulb is actually a sacred symbol and the shape is just a coincidence. The filament inside is the snake creator god Harsomtus, or Horus, the unifier of two lands. The bulb may be the womb of a goddess held by a lotus flower that looks like the bulb socket. There are many similar motifs throughout the temple, and although it is fun to believe that ancient Egyptians may have had electricity, there is no evidence of glass shards or metal sockets or filaments of any kind. These symbols are actually much more linked with ancient Egyptian mythology than with modern technology. Experts have never actually found a light bulb manufactured in ancient Egypt, though these strange images appear to suggest they figured out how electricity works far before any other culture. The Dendera light symbolizes the depiction of the sun god emerging from the lotus flower, which in a funny coincidence has the same shape as a modern light bulb, giving us a slice of sunlight whenever we want it. The Inca Water Temple. The Inca Water Temple at the archaeological site of Ollantaytambo in Peru was erected to worship their water deities. It's one of the most impressive things the Inca ever built, even though most people don't even know about it. It was an advanced water fountain that surpassed the ordinary standards of Inca engineering and construction. It's also remarkable because the temple is situated at over 9,000 feet above sea level. Yet despite the intense altitude and the dry weather of the desert, the Inca managed to divert a series of streams and channels, using them to incorporate highly advanced water fountains. These fountains boast a relatively modern knowledge of hydraulic principles. Using these principles, The Inca created over a dozen continuously flowing waterfalls that were used as ceremonial fountains. Even after 1,000 years, water from the streams continues to fuel the fountains, streaming between the blocks as if the temple was built just yesterday. Flexible glass. The Phoenicians are credited with developing the first man-made glass, which was eventually made throughout the Roman Empire. But legend holds that the ancient Romans invented a shatterproof flexible glass called vitrum flexile. This supposedly happened during the reign of Tiberius Caesar. The Roman author and philosopher Pliny the Elder wrote that the Emperor Tiberius Caesar banned flexible glass to prevent the values of gold, silver, copper, and other precious metals from plummeting. But Pliny also admitted that the story might not be true. In his satirical novel The Satyricon, Gaius Petronius wrote that the man who invented flexible glass showed it to Tiberius by throwing a cup on the ground. It didn't break, and the emperor was shocked. The cup was slightly dented from the impact of hitting the floor, so the glassmaker used a tiny hammer to pound it back into shape. After learning that this man was the only person who knew how to make flexible glass, Tiberius executed him for the same reason Pliny mentioned, to keep the value of precious metals high. Modern researchers doubt that flexible glass ever really existed, especially since Pliny mentioned that the story's truthfulness is doubtful. But experts have tried to figure out if it did exist, what would it be made of? And so far they've come up empty-handed. Was this perhaps a secret recipe made by a lonely inventor? Lost knowledge from the ancient world? The closest scientists have gotten to creating flexible glass was by adding boric oxide to the recipe. But this didn't make the glass flexible, it simply strengthened the material and made it more resistant to breaking. Even if flexible glass was real, there is a good chance we will never know what it was made of, and that its inventor took this secret recipe to the grave. A universal antidote. Mithridates VI Eupator of Pontus was a ruthless ruler who reigned from 120 to 63 BC. He orchestrated mass killings and was one of the Roman Republic's most formidable foes. But having enemies comes at a cost, and Mithridates was paranoid that someone was going to try to kill him. His father had been poisoned to death, making him especially worried that he could meet the same fate. And let's face it, back in the day, it was probably likely that you would be poisoned. You even had to watch out for your friends. Mithridates studied and experimented until he came up with the perfect solution, a universal antidote called Mithridate that was effective against all known toxins at the time. According to Pliny the Elder, it contained around 50 ingredients that were ground into a honey mixture and made into tablets. To prove that Mithridate worked, the relentless despot reportedly consumed and survived fatal doses of poison in front of audiences. He began using the concoction regularly and built up a tolerance to numerous toxins. Legend claims that when he was surrounded by his enemies about to be defeated, Mithridates tried to commit suicide with poison, but he failed since he was so resistant, and he had to ask a soldier to kill him instead. Mithridate remained popular for centuries. It was one of the most highly sought-after drugs during the Middle Ages and Renaissance, especially in Italy and France. You know, when the Medici and the Borgia were killing each other. But the recipe was lost, and modern researchers can only speculate about what was in the alleged miracle drug. Sacsayhuaman. Built during the 15th century on the outskirts of what is now Cusco, Peru, Sacsayhuaman was the historic capital of the Inca Empire. The walled ancient complex sits on a steep hill 12,142 feet above sea level. Its walls are so well fitted, even modern technology can't explain their accuracy. To give you an idea, a piece of paper won't even fit between the huge stones that were used to build this engineering model. What's more, the boulders fit together precisely and without the use of mortar. Each stone weighs as much as 220 tons, and they are some of the largest used in any pre-Hispanic building in South America. Scientists don't know how the Incas built the site. It would be extremely difficult to do with modern tools and technology, but the Inca did not even have iron tools or knowledge of the wheel. The site is baffling, but perhaps the problem is that we don't give the Incas enough credit for having the sheer ingenuity that was required to build it. Spanish conquistadors didn't believe that indigenous people, whom they saw as backwards and uncivilized, were capable of creating such a magnificent complex. The colonizers instead concluded that evil spirits were responsible for Sacsayhuaman. Even today, people are quick to resort to theories about ancient aliens, the supernatural, and conspiracies when it comes to explaining ancient sites that defy our understanding. But it's probably a lot more realistic to admit that the builders were extremely smart and skilled, and that we just haven't figured out how they did it. Roman concrete. Modern concrete is part of our everyday lives and is a simple mixture of cement, water, sand, and rocks that was invented during the 18th century. It's the world's most commonly used building material. However, the ancients had their own versions of it. The Persians, Egyptians, Assyrians, and Romans all used concrete, and it was especially popular throughout the Roman Empire. Romans had the best recipe of all. In fact, the Romans are credited with perfecting concrete. Its strength and durability can be seen in some of their buildings, which still stand over 1,000 years after the Western Roman Empire fell. This is both impressive and shocking, especially since modern concrete can break down in as little as 50 years, according to science author Zahra Ahmad. Scientists discovered that Roman concrete strengthened over time. In places where volcanic ash had dissolved, a rare mineral called aluminum tobermorite had formed. The Romans may have caused this effect by pouring seawater into their mixture, causing it to react with the volcanic ash to produce the aluminum tobermorite and another hard mineral called philipsite. Unfortunately, this process can take centuries and is not practical for modern use. Scientists are hoping to develop a similar but quicker forming solution. The first robot. Robots are understandably typically associated with modern times, but its history dates back over 2,000 years with the creation of the flying pigeon. What the heck? I know, right? It was a steam-powered device that resembled a pigeon created between 400 and 350 BC. Its creator was an ancient Greek scientist named Archytas, a good friend of Plato's, who is credited with being the founder of mathematical mechanics, or what we now call mechanical engineering. The robo-bird, which was made from wood and suspended from a pivot bar, was steam-powered. It had a lightweight body that was hollow and cylindrical, with 2 sets of wings, and had an airtight heated boiler in its rear, which generated steam and pressure, decreasing the machine's mechanical resistance and causing it to become airborne. The flying pigeon traveled for nearly 660 feet before running out of steam, making it the first ever self-propelled flying device, and also technically qualifying it as the world's first robot. Archytas' experiment also made history for being one of the first known recorded instances of a scientist studying bird flight. The lost Roman wonder herb. Silphium was a flowering herb that the ancient Romans hailed as a miracle drug, which they used for treating feral dog bites, warts, fever, indigestion, and various other ailments. It was also used as an aphrodisiac and an early form of birth control, and its contraceptive effects made it so popular it eventually became worth its weight in gold and was one of the most valuable commodities of the ancient world. It appeared on several Greek coins, and Julius Caesar stored a 1,500-pound cache of the substance in the national treasury. Silphium came from a genus of plants that grew primarily in Cyrene, a Greek and later Roman city that sat along the coast of modern-day Libya. Local kings held a monopoly on the plant for hundreds of years, making Cyrene the richest city in Africa when Silphium rose to popularity. But the popular drug rapidly disappeared from Cyrene following the Roman annexation of the city. Within 100 years, it was completely gone. The Greeks and Romans failed to ever figure out how to farm it, so they collected the plant from the wild. Harvesting limits were imposed in an effort to prevent it from completely dying out, but these rules were no match against the flourishing black market and the ever-increasing demand for this wonder drug. All that's left of Silphium that we know of are drawings and other depictions left behind by ancient naturalists. It's not impossible that it's still out there somewhere, but the herb was known to be fussy. As far as the Cyrenians or anyone else knew, Silphium only grew among a narrow 125-mile by 35-mile strip of land. While the ancient Greeks and Romans lacked sophisticated enough technology to spare Silphium from extinction, their use of it demonstrates that impressive pharmaceutical technology existed among the ancient Greeks and Romans and other ancient people. Automaton. Heron of Alexandria was a mathematician and engineer who lived lived and worked sometime between the 1st and 3rd centuries. He created numerous impressive machines, including a coin-operated holy water dispenser, the world's first automatic vending machine, an organ powered by a wind wheel, the earliest known wind-powered machine, and one of the earliest known robots called an automaton. One of his first robots was a mobile shrine to the god Dionysus, containing figurines of the god and his worshippers. It was situated on a wheeled base which rolled to a specified point and displayed a religious scene using the figurines. Another of Heron's automata was a miniature theater which featured a tragedy from beginning to end. The man's machines operated essentially on clockwork, using a descending counterweight and various cores and axles to make the scene unfold. Heron's other inventions include an automatic temple door opener, which worked using heat and pneumatics, and a steam engine called the Aeolipile, which is perhaps his most famous invention. He is considered one of the most influential early pioneers of engineering, math, geometry, and physics. Torquetum. A torquetum was a medieval instrument used for measuring 3 sets of astronomical coordinates: horizon, equatorial, and ecliptic. It was first created in the late 13th century in Europe and could mechanically interconvert between sets of coordinates without using calculations, in essence, acting as an analog computer, and could also demonstrate the relationships between coordinate sets. I don't even really know how to use that or what it even means. Bernard of Verdun, a secretive Franciscan friar who lived during the second half of the 13th century, provided one of the first accounts of the torquetum in his influential work Treatise on the Whole of Astronomy. This is actually kind of a short title for this period. Interest in the torquetum peaked during the 15th and 16th centuries, with German instrument maker Peter Apian creating the most well-known version and one of the few surviving examples in the early 1500s. The torquetum eventually fell out of popularity, perhaps because it's not very practical. Modern scholars tend to think of the tool as an example of conspicuous intellectual consumption, rather than an instrument for performing meaningful calculation. And I wanted to give a big shout out to Luis Badias, who says, "You are the best and keep doing your best. I'll for sure try." And to Joseph Kim, if you are new here, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell if you haven't already. Lycurgus Cup. The Lycurgus Cup is a 4th century Roman chalice that appears jade green when light passes through it from the front and blood red when illuminated from behind. It's made from dichroic glass, a material that changes color depending on the way the light strikes it. The 1600-year-old cup is the only complete Roman artifact made from dichroic glass, and it displays the most impressive color-changing properties of any such artifacts. Scientists at the British Museum spent decades trying to understand the dynamics behind the cup's chameleon effect after the museum acquired it during the 1950s. They came one step closer to solving the puzzle in 1990, when they examined the glass under a microscope and discovered that it was infused with silver and gold particles that were ground down until they were less than 1,000th the size of a grain of table salt. The mixture was precise, indicating that the Romans created the chalice's color-changing characteristics intentionally, making them early pioneers of nanotechnology. Wow! Light causes the electrons in the metal flecks to vibrate, transforming the cup's color depending on the viewer's angle. Acting on the suspicion that different liquids would also affect the artifact's color, researchers mimicked the same technology on a small plastic plate and exposed it to water, oil, sugar, and salt solutions. The plate displayed an array of distinctive shades, indicating that the Lycurgus cup would react in a similar way. And we thought unbreakable glass was an ancient marvel. Early prosthetic. Way before the advent of modern medicine, the ancient Egyptians showed that they were far ahead of their time by developing functioning prosthetics for amputees. In 2017, scientists discovered a 3,000-year-old wooden prosthetic toe in a tomb at the Graveyard Hill in Sheikh Abd el-Qurna, a necropolis west of Luxor. The chapel that housed the burial chamber was part of a group of rock-cut tombs built for elites and royals. While the tomb they were exploring had been plundered, there were still many archaeological remains to be found, including this incredible prosthesis. A Swiss research team examined the early Iron Age prosthesis, which belonged to a priest's daughter, using technologies like modern microscopy, X-rays, and computer imaging. They found evidence that it had been refitted several times and concluded, based on how well made it was, that the person wearing the toe wanted it to look and feel natural. The artificial toe from the early 1st millennium BC testifies to the skills of an artisan who was very familiar with the human physiognomy, the researchers said in a statement. The technical know-how can be seen particularly well in the mobility of the prosthetic extension and the robust structure of the belt strap. This big toe has revealed significant information about ancient medicine and makes me want to learn more about the girl who wore it. Viking Twilight Compass. The Unartok disc is believed to be an ancient compass that the Vikings used as they sailed in the North Atlantic along the 1,600-mile journey from Norway to Greenland. The small wooden partial disc, which measures just 2.76 inches in diameter, was discovered in an 11th century convent in Greenland in 1948. It was originally thought to be a decoration or a sundial, but in 2014, researchers from Hungary's Eötvös Loránd University performed tests that showed it could have been used as a twilight board or a compass, and that it was functional even when the sun fell below the horizon. They did a good job representing this in the TV show Vikings, don't you think? The Vikings would have been able to navigate for nearly an hour after sunset around the spring equinox by using the Unartok disc in combination with other tools, including a pair of stones called sunstones, which determined the sun's position, and something called a shadow stick, which determined their cardinal direction. Neither of these items were discovered along with the Unartok disc, but medieval records indicate that sunstones and shadow sticks were available to the Vikings, making the theory about the disc being a compass entirely plausible. Greek fire. You may have heard of Greek fire as it's one of the most widely discussed and debated lost technologies of the ancient world. During the 7th century, Byzantine ships began firing a flaming mixture that clung to their enemies' skin and boats and was impossible to extinguish with water. A family of chemists and engineers from Constantinople developed the deadly substance, and they took its recipe to the grave. Nobody has definitively determined what Greek fire was made of, but there are many theories, and not all of them have been disproven. John F. Haldon, a professor of Byzantine history and Hellenic studies at Princeton University, proposed that the substance was a combination of naphtha, a highly flammable crude oil, and pine resin, which would have made it sticky and kept it burning for a long time. But Haldon admitted that determining the ingredients used in Greek fire would not fully solve its mysteries. When enemies captured elements of the equipment, they just weren't able to work out how to use it to recreate the same effects, he told New Scientist. One possibility is that the Byzantines used a bronze pump, which pressurized oil, which was then ejected through a nozzle, igniting in the process. This type of system was recreated for a National Geographic documentary in 2002 and was put to the test with a mixture of pine resin and light crude oil. The ensuing projectile lit on fire and destroyed a ship within minutes, serving as a sign that even if experts haven't quite nailed the recipe and catapulting equipment, they're on the right track. Scientists will probably never be able to say with 100% certainty that they've uncovered the formula for Greek fire, since it was never written down, but they are completely sure of one thing: its sheer destructiveness. The hypocaust. Did you know that there was an actual heating system 2,000 years ago? Most homes around the world today don't even have central heating. The hypocaust system was an early version of central heating that originated in ancient Rome. Buildings equipped with these systems had raised floors that sat roughly 2 feet off the ground on pillars, enabling hot air to circulate in the space beneath, and were powered by furnaces that were constantly kept burning. As the hot air cooled, it escaped the building through flues in the walls and roof vents. Besides providing warmth, hypocaust systems could also be used for creating saunas by putting a pool of water into the room. The furnace would heat the water, causing steam to rise up into the air. The room's temperature would easily reach 100 degrees Fahrenheit or more, with the humidity peaking at 100%. The Romans were careful to ensure that the smoke from below did not leak into the room, because this would put the occupants at risk of potentially fatal carbon dioxide poisoning. Hypocaust systems required skilled engineering and were very expensive, and only the wealthy could afford to install one in their home. They were more commonly used in bathhouses, which served as major social centers in ancient Rome. I mean, we knew that they were advanced, but this is on a whole other level. Statue with ball. Thiruuthira Kosamangai is an ancient Shiva temple located in the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu, believed to be built by the Pandya kings starting around 3,000 years ago, possibly making it the oldest temple of its kind in the world. There are numerous shrines throughout the temple, as well as a one-of-a-kind 6-foot-tall Maragatha Nataraja idol carved from a single block of emerald around the same time the temple was built. Curiously, nobody knows where the emerald came from or how the builders were able to create this marvel without breaking it. They must have had extremely advanced and delicate craftsmanship to create such a marvel. But what has impressed people over the years is a statue of a Yali, a mythological creature somewhat resembling a lion located near the temple's entrance. Inside the statue's mouth, there's a large stone ball that rolls around, yet cannot be removed because the mouth's opening is too small. While the statue itself is made of granite, the ball inside is made of onyx. How the statue's creator got the ball into the Yali's mouth is an engineering mystery that continues to puzzle experts. Modern sculptors have replicated the statue using modern technology, but nothing even close to what would have been available to the original creator. What did the sculptor use to carve this perfect ball inside a different kind of stone? How do you think they did it? Let me know in the comments below. Ancient antidepressant. Nepenthe was a drug of Greek mythology that made its first appearance in Homer's Odyssey as a magical potion that an Egyptian queen gave to Helen, and which quelled her sorrows with forgetfulness. The word Nepenthe translates to the one that chases away sorrow, and was frequently mentioned in Greek literature. While some believe that Nepenthe was a fictional drug, others argue that it was probably real and commonly used throughout certain parts of the ancient world, namely Egypt and Greece. The theory that arguably makes the most sense is based on the drug's memory-impairing effects and claims that Nepenthe was an opium solution, perhaps something similar to laudanum. Other suggestions include that the substance was coffee, wormwood extract, or scopolamine. It's also entirely possible that Nepenthe is used in modern medicine and that we are simply unaware of its connection to the fabled Greek drug because we know it as something else. Greek fire. The Byzantine Empire was the most powerful economic, military, and cultural force in Europe throughout most of its existence. Founded in Byzantium, which later became Constantinople and then Istanbul, the Byzantine Empire is also known as the Eastern Roman Empire. It outlived the fall of the Western Roman Empire by 1,000 years. During the first Arab siege of Constantinople in the late 7th century, the Greek-speaking Byzantines invented a weapon called Greek fire. It was a highly flammable liquid launched from tubes mounted on Greek ships, with deadly consequences to the Arab fleet attacking Constantinople. It was a very effective weapon since all ships were made of wood and would easily go up in flames, plus I'm sure they weren't really expecting it. The longevity of the Byzantine Empire has been attributed to the deadliness of their Greek fire, especially in marine combat. Following its first ever use in 673, Greek fire was employed effectively against an Arab attack in 717 and against a Russian fleet during the 10th century. To this day, nobody knows exactly what Greek fire was made of. It stuck to surfaces, burned on water, and was extinguishable only by sand, vinegar, or old urine. Attempts to replicate the mixture have failed to be able to do all of this. A variety of lesser formulas have been mislabeled as Greek fire, but the composition of the real thing was a closely guarded secret, like the Coca-Cola recipe. When the liquid and the machine that launched it was captured by enemy forces, they still couldn't figure out what it was made of. Historians believe it was a heated and pressurized petroleum-based mixture, but we still don't know for sure how the heck they made it. The ancient rock ship of Asuka. Masuda no Iwafune, or the Rock Ship of Masuda, is a mysterious monolith located in Asuka Nara in Japan. The area is known for its many Buddhist temples and shrines, but there are actually several stone monuments in the hills that don't fit in with any other construction, and no one seems to know who built them or when. The village itself dates back to 250 to 552 AD, and these date to before then. Throughout the region, there are multiple strangely shaped carved granite stones, the largest and most unusual of which is known as the Rock Ship. It stands atop a hill in Asuka and is 11 meters long, 8 meters wide, and 4.7 meters high, with a weight around 800 tons. There are two 1-meter square holes carved into the top of the structure, which has a flattened top. Lattice-shaped indentations at the base of the structure are believed to reflect the procedure used to build it. Like I said, nobody knows who built the rock, when they built it, or why. It may have been constructed by Buddhists for some type of ceremony, given the region's many Buddhist temples and shrines, but Masuda no Iwafune does not resemble the architecture of any known Buddhist structure. Perhaps the stone was carved to commemorate the former Masuda Lake, which was once nearby but was drained. The structure may have been an astronomical observation point. A ridgeline on the top of it runs parallel to the mountain range in Asuka and aligns with the sunset on a day called Spring Doyu Entry. This may have signaled the beginning of the agricultural season. Scholars tend to dismiss this theory, however. One other idea is that the structure is the ancient tomb of a royal family, and maybe it used to have a lid, but it's hard to say for sure. Ulfberht Sword. Archaeologists are pretty stumped by a Viking sword that has gained practically legendary status. These swords were stronger than anything ever seen before, and they were lightweight, razor-sharp, and flexible. Dating between 800 to 1000 AD, these mysterious swords were engraved with the word Ulfberht. At first, they were believed to be a hoax, as it appeared to be made using technology that wasn't available until at least 800 years later. During the Viking era, a weapon with these qualities would have been so highly advanced it may have been seen as having supernatural characteristics. Whoever has the toughest sword is probably going to win the battle.
While whoever made them, most likely Ulfbert, had the skill and knowledge, it is true that this type of technology wasn't available on a large scale until the 19th and 20th centuries during the Industrial Revolution. The iron ore the swords were made from had to be heated to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit to remove impurities. To strengthen the material, it was mixed with carbon, effectively turning it into steel. At the time, humans had no way of heating something to that high of a temperature that we know of, and instead usually hammered the impurities out of iron to the best of their ability. There are no evident impurities in the Ulfbert swords, which contain 3 times the carbon than any other metals of the time, a mixture called crucible steel. It's hard to believe that such a high-quality material was manufactured in the absence of industrial furnaces. Ulfbert swords were likely made in the Kingdom of Francia near modern-day France and Germany, but exactly who made them is unknown. There have also been knockoffs discovered that weren't nearly as strong. The process used for making the swords is also unknown, but researchers believe it may have borrowed techniques from Arab blacksmiths, who made a similar high-quality material called Damascus steel. It involved melting trace amounts of minerals with iron and carbon. The swords may also have been made using steel shipped from the Arab empires or India by traders. Perhaps the world used to be much more connected than we once thought. Rongo Rongo writing of Easter Island. Easter Island is located over 2,000 miles west of the Chilean coast. The island's remoteness helped give rise to a unique ancient culture unlike any other. To this day, researchers are still trying to unravel some of the mysteries of Easter Island. One of the several yet unsolved mysteries is deciphering the Rongo Rongo writing system. In 1864, a missionary named Eugene Ayrode discovered 26 wooden tablets containing a series of glyphs that appear to be a type of writing. The glyphs are mostly symbols of animals, humans, plants, and geometric forms, and are read from left to right, bottom to top. But the meaning of the symbols is unknown, along with other key details such as the age of the tablets, although we are guessing they're from the 13th century. The symbols may be an expression of the Rapa Nui language of the indigenous inhabitants of the island. Some believe that the glyphs are a form of proto-writing, an early system of writing based on symbols that preceded writing systems based on characters, and which conveys information without any linguistic content. Decoding the messages on the tablets could help researchers better understand the civilization that once lived on Easter Island, and perhaps even why it collapsed. Sacsayhuaman Fortress Walls. Outside of Cusco, Peru, is a walled complex known as Sacsayhuaman. Sounds kind of like sexy woman, which was built with perfectly fitted, massive boulders weighing up to 200 tons each. It's unknown when the walls were constructed, but they're thought to even predate the Inca civilization. The complex was used as a fortress and ceremonial location. In addition to the mystery of how the builders moved the enormous stone blocks, archaeologists have failed to explain the amazingly advanced engineering behind the structure. The walls were built with precision that would be considered impressive even in modern times. There's not even room to slip in a sheet of paper. Additionally, researchers are also perplexed by the rounded corners of the blocks, variety of interlocking shapes, and inward-leaning nature of the walls. Theories abound, including the possible use of a chemical that softened the stones, the use of large sun mirrors to generate heat and cause mineral disaggregation, and possibly even extraterrestrial intervention. You know, 'cause aliens. The mysteries appear to be partially solved by retired architect and construction manager John Macaulay, who specializes in ancient construction techniques. First and foremost, Macaulay attributes the building of the Sacsayhuaman fortress walls to the ingenuity of those who built it. He hypothesizes that the smaller stone blocks were moved along a path of loose soil, while the larger boulders were transported on a wooden sled. Then perhaps they were pounded into shape until they fit together literally almost perfectly, a process that would have been painstaking and indescribably complicated. The builders may have also relied on wooden templates, but you know, there's a lot you can do without internet and TV. For now, our knowledge of how the walls were built are limited to theories, and Mr. Macaulay seems to be the most credible thus far. Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni. The complex of excavated chambers known as the Hypogeum of Sal Saflieni was discovered in Malta in 1902 and is the only existing example of subterranean labyrinth architecture in Europe. It was likely used as a sanctuary and/or burial site between 4000 and 2500 BC by our ancestors and may be the world's oldest prehistoric underground temple. The three-level structure contains ornate designs and architecture that was carved from the rock, and its various chambers were used for different purposes, including one that housed a mass grave. Perhaps the most fascinating feature of this structure is its auricle chamber, where words spoken at a normal volume are amplified well enough to be heard throughout the entire structure. While the acoustics of the auricle chamber can be explained scientifically, researchers struggle to understand why it was built and if the amplifying effect was intentional. Some believe the chamber may have been used by an oracle, perhaps to affect people's psyches or enhance mystical experiences during rituals. The Antikythera mechanism. In 1900, a group of divers in the Mediterranean Sea discovered the remains of an ancient Greek shipwreck that sank sometime between 60 and 70 BC. They salvaged 3 pieces of bronze that later became known as the Antikythera mechanism. Inside the corroded green pieces are examples of technology far ahead of its time, including gears with triangular teeth and a protractor-like ring divided into degrees. All other devices this sophisticated date back to at least 1,000 years after the mechanism was in use. More than a century later, researchers are still puzzled about the device and its purpose. During the 1970s and the 1990s, X-ray imaging was done on the mechanism. The images suggested that it was used for keeping track of celestial bodies, but were ultimately impossible to interpret definitively. It was some type of analog computer. Then, scholars more or less forgot about the device for some time. CT scans taken in 2006 renewed scholarly interest in the Antikythera mechanism, and it was ultimately determined that the device was used to track astronomical movements. It contained at least 7 hands, driven by interlocking gear wheels, which were put in motion by a knob or a gear on the side. While researchers are finally able to describe how the device works, they remain baffled by the advanced technology, since nothing even remotely like this has been found from the time the mechanism was created. It is truly one of a kind. Thanks for watching! Were you surprised by any of these? Be sure to subscribe if you are new here and let me know which one was your favorite in the comments below. See you next time! Bye!